This is John Afshar working on a WaveForm Pro 4x4 installation. A couple of interesting things. I'll tell you the general gist of what I tried and how it went. Let me flip this camera around so you can kind of see what I'm working with here. So this is the roof, and the tower is vaguely in that direction. There is a beautiful tower right there that does not work with Verizon, which is the internet service that I have. Nor does AT&T, who I believe that tower belongs to, provide internet service here. So despite the fact there's a wonderful tower right there, I can't use it at all. I tried it anyway over here on the front left corner of the roof. Didn't really seem to work at all. Got very bad speeds. Tried it up here kind of in the center part of my roof. The speeds there were okay. I also ended up trying it on the overhang underneath the roof, thinking I could shield it from the sun and the rain a little bit because it's Las Vegas, but the speeds were noticeably worse. The best speeds I got were right where it's sitting here in the front right, although in the back right here, the speeds were pretty comparable. Overall, I have to say the general gist of the speed seems to be significantly better than I was getting just through the modem in my house. In my house, I was getting about 85 megabits per second down and about 35 up. Still getting about the same 35 up or so here, but the fastest that I got in my testing outside was about 316 megabits per second. So approaching 4 times as fast. That said, there is a significant difficulty in 5G wireless, or at least here in my location, that makes testing really hard. And that is that the speeds on cellular wireless seem to be extremely variable. I tested it in that front right corner that I showed where it is. And like I said, I was getting speeds of 316 megabits per second, but then 15-20 minutes later, when I had gone through another couple rounds of testing, sat down and started looking at the directional testing, I was getting maybe 50 megabits per second. One other thing I noticed is that, at least based on the literature on the website and what I'd read before, I know that the 4x4 Pro is a directional antenna, and my understanding was that it was highly directional, meaning just very small changes would likely lead to big differences in speed. But what I found is that when I was testing it, I had a little compass out and I was testing at about 15-degree increments just to see how the speeds were affected. And what I found was that anywhere from 0 all the way up to 75 degrees or so didn't really seem to make a difference. So because the speeds are so variable, it makes it very difficult to tell, both what the correct orientation in terms of directionality or degree of orientation ought to be, or two, even where the best general place on the roof is to place it. Because like I said, when I did it before, my initial testing was about 316 megabits per second. My second round of testing was about 45 megabits per second, which was significantly slower than even the front left part of the roof, which was by far the worst when I was testing it at that time. So I think in terms of time of day, variable band switching, just the inherent unreliability of cellular, I think this front right is probably the best that I'm going to get. That seems to be the case, but it's also very suspect and definitely could change. So I'll try it. I'll show it when it's mounted, let you know what kind of speeds I'm getting inside once it's all hooked up, and we'll see what happens. One other thing to note about the window connectors, you should check to see if they're going to fit your particular circumstance. Mine, you can see, despite the fact that you can kind of attach them, there's some sticky tape on either side of the 2 connector ends, or you can actually screw them into the wall. It's not actually long enough to allow me to screw either end into the particular window framing setup that I have here. So while I could kind of leave it out like this and just connect the wires together, you know, the first time I decide to ever open this window, it's just going to fall right down, and then you're just going to sort of be in the position of adjusting the wires or slamming the window on the connector to make it go in there because it doesn't fit in super easily. And so I ended up just putting it through the wall again. Partially that was because at one point there had been a DirecTV cable through here, so I already knew where the cable was supposed to go. But more, it's just so that I don't have to constantly fiddle with the thing every time I want to open or close the window. And you definitely don't want the window to be open because again, in Las Vegas, it'll get up to 110, 120 degrees. Also, it gets cold in the winter, so it's just not a good idea to have the window consistently open. And this is, at least for me, a better solution. Final thoughts then on the installation of the WaveForm QuadPro 4x4. As you can see, it's mounted up here on the roof. Facing this way on the house, it's at the top left, although when I was up on the roof facing out that way, it was the top right that I was talking about. So a few different thoughts. First, the installation on the roof was actually quite simple. I put 3 screws through the pole mount, through the shingles up there. That went in no problem. The pole itself attached very easily, attached to the antenna very well. Everything's quite secure up there, so no problems with that. By far, I would say the hardest part of the installation was actually attaching the external antenna to the Verizon Cube, because there are no external antenna connectors on the Verizon Cube. You have to actually open it up and use very small connectors on a circuit board. I have some electronics experience. You know, I've built computers before, I've got some general mechanical type stuff, but I've never before opened up a modem. Obviously, I didn't show you how to do that here. There are plenty of better videos than I could do that are already online. I've watched many of them before I decided to break it open. But if you are just kind of patient, follow those videos along. I found that while it was maybe a little disconcerting because I didn't want to break the actual modem itself, it wasn't actually that hard. Aside from actually installing the antenna onto the modem, I would say the second hardest thing was figuring out where to actually place it and trying to figure out whether, honestly, it's installed, I would say, optimally. When I did the initial testing, as I've said a couple of times, I was getting maybe 316 megabits per second. That's why I decided to put it up here. However, that's quite variable. In several hours after I've put it up here, I've had speeds all the way from maybe 50 megabits a second inside, pretty consistently around 200 megabits per second. 300 is really good if there doesn't seem to be any traffic. But it does seem to be pretty variable, and so I don't know for sure that this is the best place that it could possibly be, and I don't really know how to find that out because changes on the roof seem to be secondary really to changes in the speed. Do I think it's worth it overall? Yes, I would say so. Like I said, in general, I'm getting about 200 plus megabits per second now. 300 seems to be more peak. However, prior to getting the antenna, I was getting about 85 inside. So if I'm getting 2, maybe 3 times the speed that I was before, for about $350, $400, that's pretty good. You know, I'm pretty happy with that. It does allow me to get rid of my cable internet provider, which I have very much wanted to do for quite some time. And even though the speeds are quite variable, I would say that it's quite rare to get as low as 50 some odd megabits per second, and 180, 200 is certainly fast enough for my needs and more than I would have necessarily thought I would get off of cellular internet in general. So the installation, pretty easy. Wish I didn't have to break into the modem, but that was just the way that my particular modem worked. Installation on the roof was just fine, and in general it went